I have the distinct honor to introduce Rukmini Banerjee, our keynote speaker. She will tell us about the remarkable effort that she and her organization have led in India and around the world, and that has changed the lives of millions of children, helping them to read, write, and do math. Rukmini Banerjee is the CEO of the Pratham Education Foundation, one of the largest NGOs working in this field in India. She will tell us about how they tackled this daunting challenge, learning to read, write, and do math in a country of 1.3 billion people with millions of children in school. She will tell us how her organization has put together a cadre of more than 30,000 volunteers who work with communities to measure the problem and find good solutions. And she will tell us how her work and the work of her organization has changed the public debate in India around learning. But this goes way beyond work in the education sector. It actually has lessons for all of us. And our very own Christabel Dadzie, who's a social protection specialist from Ghana and based in the World Bank office in Ghana, will help us draw those lessons from a conversation with Rukmini. On a personal note, let me just say how inspiring I found Rukmini's journey and the perfect note on which to kickstart the learning in this adventure of the forum together. And I hope that by the very end of the week, we will all be a little bit closer to our own tiger. And you'll get what I mean by tiger. Help me welcome to the stage Dr. Rukmini Banerjee and Christabel Dadzie. Thank you.
It's very nice to have company on the stage, so you feel less nervous with someone else here. Thank you so much, Roberta, Halsey, and the whole team for having me here. I was hugely honored to be invited here. And I thought I was going to a very serious conference. And I come here and I find that the people at the World Bank, they rap. And then they do all kinds of very relaxing exercises for mindfulness. And then it's okay on stage to talk about cricket. They say of course, not for the kind of cricket we are playing right now, but for test matches, that it's very difficult to speak before lunch, because that's when the batsmen get out. And so let me see what I can do in the time that we have. So I work for an organization called Pratham, and our goal, right even when we started, was that every child should be in school and learning well. In the early days when we began our work in Mumbai, we did a lot of work with getting children into school. Children who are out of school are very visible. You can see them everywhere. Street corners, in the fields, they're everywhere. And so they're easy to see. But as our work went on, more and more of our energy was going into kids who were in school and seemed like they were not quite at the level at which they should be. And so if you think of these two kinds of children, those who were left out, visible, and those who are left behind, much more invisible. Because they're in school, sometimes they're smiling, and very often they're not. And the teachers and parents both had a sense, and I'm talking about maybe 15 years ago, that things were not quite what they thought it should be. But what was really wrong was really the question. And so in Pratham, and with many other people who are pondering on the same problem, we've spent probably the last 15 years trying to sort out what can be done. And today I'll tell you a little bit of that journey. Now, our early years were spent in the large, big cities of India, where we worked at kind of trying to fix what we thought was the foundation which was causing this problem. But around about 2000, we began to also venture into the villages. And there, when you go into a village or into any new context, I think it's very important to understand whether whatever your experience was and what you thought children in the big cities needed do children here in the rural areas need that or not? And so you have to be on a sort of a journey of trying to figure out what would that whole dynamic be. And in this process, I've spent quite a lot of my own life trying to figure out what works in different kinds of settings. And a particular incident happened, and I think I've been trying to think exactly which year, but at least 15 years ago. And when the incident was happening, it didn't seem that important. It just seemed like regular, everyday stuff. But in retrospect, I think that incident kind of captured a lot of what we were trying to do and also actually taught us lessons. So I'm going to share that little story with you, and let's see whether that makes sense to you like it did to me. So this is a village in a big state, one of our more educationally backward states, Uttar Pradesh, UP. And in trying to figure out what the story in the village was, we used to do something called a village report card. And it was a report card, like a census, for the village to see whether all children were in school and whether they could do basic reading and basic math. And so it was really a census of just that. Now, when you go into a village, the first thing to do is to let people know what you're going to do. And so, in good faith, we looked for I guess we should call him the headman or the village chief of the council. In UP, he's called Pradhan, and we add G just as respect. So we looked for Pradhanji. These are very important people in the village. We found him. He had a big livestock business. So the day I met him, he was very busy milking his buffaloes. And I tried to explain what we were going to do. But he was a busy man. He didn't have that patience. He said, oh, it's a survey. People come every day to do surveys. Go ahead. One more is what you could see in his eyes. The process that we used was actually to go from neighborhood to neighborhood and use what I'll show you is a very simple tool. I always have trouble with these things. Very simple tool. Many of you can't read it, which is not a problem, because many parents in India can't read it either. But I'm sure you can tell what is harder and what is easier. And so the idea was you take this out, you ask kids, their families, are the kids in school? Can they read anything here? If so, at which level? And soon after the first or second or third child, other people become quite interested. And so you find some volunteers who can then take it on. And so that this whole process can be a process in which everybody participates, people ask questions, and I find there are two levels of discussion. One happens where the kids are trying to figure out what you want from them, and the other is the grown-ups. And in places like UP and my own home state, which is Bihar, quite similar, I found that after doing several years of this, that a blame game starts. Because when kids can't read, people start blaming. And with no disrespect to people from England, it starts with the English. Yeah. So you first blame the English, then you blame the leaders of independent India, then you blame the chief minister, then you blame everybody all the way down, and I've almost timed it. It takes 45 minutes. You have to let the steam out of the system. And by the time it comes down, if you can't find anyone else, then you blame the children. Because I get my son ready, but he goes off and plays cricket, so on and so forth. So once that is all done, then comes the discussion about what can we do about it. And it almost is necessary to let this whole thing go ahead. So we did this in this village. It was a medium-sized village. It took us about 2 or 3 days. It was me and another colleague. And at the end of this process, we went hunting for Pradhanji again, because now we needed to discuss the whole result from the whole village. He was still very busy, because it's, busy people are busy all the time. And when I went and met him, the first thing he said was, where should I sign? Now, actually, on our little formats, there's nowhere to sign, because it isn't going anywhere. And so I tried to explain that this is really not for sending anywhere. This is just for us. And then he said something which I think was very important. I mean, he didn't say it in the way I'll say it. But basically, he said that these papers are for going up. And in my mind, the picture that stuck was that data is one of the few things that defies gravity, at least in India. It always goes up and never comes down. And so he said, there has to be a place that you sign. Because most important things have to be sent somewhere. Now, by this time, I'd spent 3 or 4 days. It was hot. I wanted to get the whole process going. I had a whole team of people to whom we were saying, this is how we should do it. And Mr. Pradhanji was stopping my own progress. And so I said, believe me, this is how we do it. So he said, I don't think you know. Why don't you call your superior? Now, I felt, I like to think of myself as not having much ego, but that really bugged me. And I said, I am actually the superior. Thinking that this would clinch the deal, but it didn't. He turned around and he said, if you are the superior, why are you hanging out in villages? And you didn't even come in a car. But what it did, I think, what this banter did, is we got his attention. So then we said, he stopped milking his cattle, and he said, what is it that you're trying to do? And so then we could say, well, here it is. We're trying to find out, are children enrolled in school? Can they read? And there's a similar one for math, and so on. So he said, look, there are many things I should do in the village, and maybe I'm not doing all of them, but education I'm very interested in. So, X number of children are in school, which was pretty close to the number that we had. And I don't believe this, that children who are in school can't read. So therefore, this is false. Oh no, I think first he said, therefore, it can't be. When we went further, his point was that, it's a big village, surveys happen all the time, people come, they have good intention, then the sun gets hot, then you go and sit in the tea shop, then you fill it out how you can, and so therefore it must be false because nobody actually goes house to house. At this point, as many of you know, in India, there is no privacy. We're not having a private conversation. The whole village is there. And people start saying, no, this is not like that because we helped in this. So actually this was done, and other people started murmuring as well. Then it comes to the fact that if this is really the case, that there are 100 kids in the village, 85 of them are in school. We actually know all the others who are not and what reasons. But only 40 or 50% can read. Then it's impossible. It can't be. And no amount of discussion and no amount of other people telling him that this is what the fact was convincing him. So there was only one way to convince him. And I handed him the piece of paper, and I said, why don't you find out? Because it's quite easy, as you can see. So he walked down the village. It was not randomized at all, because whoever was the kids that came in front of him, he asked them to read. And by the 6th or 7th kid, he said, oh my God, this is really true. And then he was kind of galvanized into action. But it took this whole drama to get to that point. And I think that when it was happening, it was just a day in the life of doing village report cards. But the more over the years I've thought about it, it seemed to me that it highlighted some very important things about this whole business, about collecting information and making something of it. So since I've flown from across the world just for an hour, and I felt I'm in the World Bank, and at some point I had a PhD, I thought I should try to do a framework or lessons or something. And so this is my attempt, and some of my young colleagues even animated it. So the first thing was that you actually needed to engage people. And I think this is something that I've always, after incidents like this, have thought that if you don't have a question in mind, giving you a nice answer doesn't help, because I wasn't even looking for the question. So how and what do you do to encourage people to be curious, to get them to engage actively? All those discussions from the high level to the low level, there's 45 minutes of blowing steam. All of this is part of engagement and of participation, because you've got to feel part of what is going on if you really want the process to go forward. And all of that can't happen if the activity is very complicated. And hence, the simplicity of whatever it is that the measurement that we are doing, I think really helps, because it pinpoints you to some one or two very important things, but doesn't tie you up in a lot of detail that kind of impedes your progress. The second thing I think that we learned in this process is that even a village is a big place. There are many children. And some of those children you don't know. And yet, it is important because the information that is being generated, you should feel like it's your own. So from then, I think one of the things we do is to work hamlet by hamlet or neighborhood by neighborhood or lane by lane, however the habitation is split up. Because at some level, when you're beginning this process of engagement, you need to feel that you know not just the whole, not just the individual kids, my grandson, my niece, my neighbor's son, but somehow connect the individuals with the aggregate. And at this level, the only way to do it is when it's your own data, it happens in front of your own eyes, and you're actually able to connect, as I call it, the anecdote to the aggregate. Because that's when, and we are not very sophisticated. Even in our higher circles, I don't think we have we have a long history of many things in India, but not of actually measurement and data. And therefore, I think some of these things at the ground level are really important. Having done all of that, like Pradhanji, that now you've engaged, you believe your data, you believe the reality, you're shaken up by it, and it's only then that you start thinking about what solutions we can do. If you don't understand it, if you can't kind of pinpoint what you can do, then it's hard to think about solutions. And having thought about solutions, and this needed some encouragement in the village, that let's, in thinking about solutions, not only blame whoever it is who was supposed to do it. I don't know what my child can read. How do I expect that the teacher who has 50 kids would know exactly what my child can do? So can we first think about what we can do, and then go to demand or cajole or persuade whoever it is that is supposed to deliver it? And so how can this whole process work? And in these hundreds of village report card processes that we did, I think this is what we learned. That to get collective action, or even to get individual action, you really needed to engage and understand the problem. Now, at some stage, we also began to think, if this kind of dynamic is working, the village would then recruit some volunteers, sometimes the teachers participated as well, and some kind of a reading or a basic math program would start as a result of this. And so at some 2005 or so, we decided to do this at a national level. And that is what is called the ASER report, the Annual Status of Education Report. But actually the word ASER, as many of you will know, means impact in many of our Indian languages. And so the idea was that this awareness, this bringing from invisible to visible, getting engagement, how can it be done? And if it can be done in a whole country, then can it lead to what I would call climate change for thinking about learning? Today with the WDR, we don't have to convince people anymore. But in 2005, this was an uphill battle to convince different kinds of people that just schooling will not solve our problem. We have to have children in school, but we also have to work on learning issues. So I don't want to take up too much time because I want the conversation. If somebody said to me that you can show one piece of data, you're going to the World Bank, show them one piece of data that describes Indian education, what would it be? And I think I've picked this one from the most recent report, grade 3, 4, and 5. And I think what Annette said in the morning about millions of children who reach grade 5 or are 10 years old who can't read, this gives you actually a concrete example of that. And I'll quickly take you through it because hopefully we will have time to talk about solutions when we can come back to this table again. So you see in grade 5, half the children can at least read at that short story level. And maybe they can read higher because we don't measure higher. But then if you look at what lies, you can't say tail of the distribution because the tail seems to indicate it should be a small thing that is long. This is a big fat body of the distribution which falls, and there are, even after 5 years of school, we have almost, let's say, 18% kids who are still not yet able to read words. They're either reading letters or not at all. We have, and you can see what the percentages are right here. This is a story that has not changed very much in 15 years. It has still, I think the first ASER had a 50% number for grade 5, and this is 2018, which is still around that. There's been some ups and downs a little bit, but more or less it has stayed steady. The other thing that you see here is that the learning curves are also quite flat. The difference between kids in grade 3 and grade 5, there is a difference, but I think that each year of school should bring a much bigger jump if you really want years of schooling to translate into years of human capital that are going to take you ahead. And the third thing is this diversity or this distribution in each grade. Every grade seems to have every kind of kid. And so if I'm a 5th grade teacher, who do I teach? Do I teach the kids who really can't do anything? Or do I teach the kids who are at the top of the class? And given the way our education system is structured and highly anchored by our age grade curriculum, what our teachers end up doing is actually teaching to the top of the class, which is to this 50%, which gradually gets less and less as you go higher. So before concluding, the title of this talk session was "What is your tiger?" And I feel like I have to give some explanation for why we have that. I was with my son 2 days ago, and he asked me where I was going, and I told him, and he said, "What are you talking about?" And I said, "I'm talking about tigers." And I don't know how many people here have family members who are very skeptical about what you do. And so my son said, "Oh, so you're onto a new thing now." Okay. So this comes from another small story. A friend and a colleague headed one of our big states, big, poor, backward states, Department of Rural Development. And he had many, many sectors under him: water, sanitation, livelihoods, microfinance, everything was under him. And he and I were chatting one day, and I think he was a little bit jealous of my life, where I can do whatever I want, and I'm not held up for service delivery like he is. And he said, "Rukmini, you're so lucky you have your tiger." And at that time in India, we were running, or somebody was running, a big campaign on TV about how many tigers there were in India: 1,128. And if that number went up, it meant that something right was being done in the ecosystem. And we had famous movie stars and other people doing these campaigns saying that we need to think about the survival of the tiger. And really, I think, I don't know, I've had arguments with environmentalists that this is not the right, right theory of change. But I think it does invoke in everyone that if the number of tigers increases or something happens to the tigers, it means that something is going right beneath. So I turned the thing back to him and I said, "You are one of the most powerful people in this state. You have the most resources. So what is your tiger?" And he said, he was kind of quiet. He's not a very quiet guy otherwise, but he was, senior government people usually have views. But he was quite quiet, and he said, "Let me think about it." And he called me in the evening, and he said, "I've thought about it, and if I had to pick 1 or 2 things, like your reading or your math," he said, "I would pick malnutrition." Although malnutrition was not a clear department under him. So I want to end there, but I want to say that this is a very special tiger. This is a tiger that is in the first primer of, I know it's used in West Bengal. I don't know if it's used in Bangladesh. It's the first primer. It's the first text that kids read in 1st grade. And Tagore actually wrote this primer. Tagore was a famous school dropout. He didn't like being in school because he didn't like the kinds of schools that he was sent to. So he started his own school. And his thought was that I wish I could have put the text as well. The text is also very simple, very beautiful, and lyrical, but he felt that the illustrations in the book also have to be such that children, right from the first day, get used to really high-quality stuff. And so this is our tiger, and I will stop now.
Wow, Rukmini, this is extremely exciting work that you're doing, very fascinating. But I think the reason I'm here, though, is that, like you, we always blame the English in Ghana when everything goes wrong. And then we go and blame the government. That's it ends right there. We don't come down to the end. So very interesting pieces there. I'm curious to know from you, you talk about the essay, and if I heard you right, you said it's 1 page. Is that correct?
Oops. My bag is over there. It is really 1 page. Oh. I forgot to bring my purse up on. I always have the assert tool in my purse, and it literally is 1 page. It's exactly like what you saw, except we have it in many languages, and there's a math version as well.
Excellent. So the whole idea there is keeping it simple.
Keeping it simple, yes.
Okay.
Yeah.
So you spend a bit of time talking about the problem. Can you tell us a little bit about what some of the solutions are?
So I think that there are many problems, but let's say if I had to think about how to solve the key problem that we see here, The key problem here is that kids have moved through school, but as yet, they are not, forget about at grade level, they're not even at a level which is, you can say, is a basic foundational fluency. And so this same analysis, which shows you the problem, to us also indicates a solution. And again, when I said that if a 5th grade teacher, who will she teach? Because she has so many different kinds of kids. And if you think about school systems, mostly in the world, they are actually, the school system typically is a row. And the row is described by age and a grade. So you're 10 years old, you're in 5th grade, and you're supposed to do a certain 5th grade curriculum. But kids are way below that. And so what do you do? And the solution that we have been working on for the last almost the same period of time as we are talking about the problem is that if you group kids, so if you, for a couple of hours a day, instead of teaching children by rows, if you group them by the columns, then we see actually quite quick progress. And at some point in this process, JPAL, who's been a long-run evaluation partner with us, gave it the name called Teaching at the Right Level. So, while there is a syllabus and there is an age grade curriculum, for a little while, and that little while can be, we can discuss how much that little while should be, you group children by level, and you can actually see quite fast progress. And if I show you, when Pratham teams actually do this in a government primary school, you can get, and even if you're in the back and can't see the numbers, you can see the green increasing. This is the kind of change to bring readers, to bring kids who are not readers and make them into readers in about 30 to 50 days. This is possible when it's volunteers or people outside the school system doing it, who don't have anything else that they are preoccupied with.
Right. Very interesting. So I think let's stick to that whole idea of taking a little movement and taking it to scale. Are we getting your purse? Is that what's happening? Let's do it.
Roberta did not believe that it really, I was showing this to her, and I said that no matter where I am, I seem to need to bring it out, whether I'm at a bus stop in India and so it's slightly in bad shape because it's been brought out many times, but it really is, I feel like a magician.
Well, we're getting there.
I'm getting there. So it's really, this one is in English. And please, our tools are usually in much better shape. And this is the math. So it really is quite simple.
Wow, that's what we call agile at the World Bank.
It's also frugal. It's just a page. Yeah.
So speaking of the World Bank, for us, the government is our client. And so I'm actually curious to know, you talked about being in the most remote villages, and you started this little idea that turned into a movement. Have you been able to infiltrate governments? How have you done it, and where are you going with that?
So, once we had, one was the assessment and the understanding of the problem. And once you begin to feel the problem, among the early reports that we did, and because India is a big country and because not a census, but a representative sample is done in every district, it's still very large. You have more than 600,000 kids every year in the sample. It started a new conversation. I remember back in the same state, UP, taking the second or the third ASR to the chief, whoever was the head of the education department. And he looked at it and he said, exactly like the Pradhan did, he said, oh my God, I mean, either you're wrong, which is also possible, and he had the exact same reaction as the Pradhan. And he picked up the phone and he called Tamil Nadu, which is an advanced state in the south of India, and he called his counterpart. And he said, have you seen this report? Because that UP is doing badly, I can understand, we're a backward state. Right. But if Tamil Nadu is doing badly, then these guys are either wrong, and we should just throw the report out of the window, or we should engage like Pradhan and figure out whether this is true. So it also, what it did at the first level was it opened new conversations. And it made people curious. My Pradhan was curious at the ground level, this was curiosity at a much bigger level. And really the first interactions and partnerships with government started at that point. And as we've gone on, whatever are the refinements to this that you see here, we take to the government. And I'll show you just the most recent one, which we've done in UP. Now, UP has 113,000 schools. It's a huge state. And in the huge state, their learning levels, as you can see, they had hardly this is grade 3, 4, and 5, they had less than 20% kids who could actually read when we started. But how does a small organization, I mean, we are not small, but we are nothing compared to the government. Right. How do you bring your ideas into the government? And we have a couple of simple things. One is that the government has to create their own leaders of practice. This thing that, say, we think is a good idea, somebody has to try it out. At the village level, it was a volunteer. In the government level, there has to be some leaders. So for this state, which has 75 districts, to begin with, 4 people from the government came forward, and they did about a month worth of actual instructional practice for 2 hours a day. At the end of that month, they had produced almost a 20 percentage point change. Once they could see that, then they could pass it on to the next level and the next level. And this is what, what you see here is about anywhere between 45 to 60 days within a large government system, which basically followed the key principles of grouping by level for a couple of hours a day, but led by people who had done it themselves.
Very interesting. So there is a method to which you can take something very little. I think one of the pieces there is also the focus. You keep doing it, you keep trying it, you keep testing it. That's amazing.
And I was thinking with the session before that if we then add to it the 1, 2, 3, 4, oh my God, this will go through the roof.
You had your own 1, 2, 3, 4, right? So it seems to be the theme today. Excellent. Yeah. So tell us also in terms of just not looking at India, because I'm very curious. I'm from Ghana. This morning we were having this discussion about the Human Capital Index. There's some data out there that's showing that in Africa we're really low, which is a problem. And so this is the conversation at the heart, I think, of all of us, even if we're not educationists. Tell us a little bit if you've done some work outside of India and how that is being done.
So the Asar stuff was very interesting. I mean, we did it essentially, as you could see from what I said, for ourselves, for our own context. And even for ourselves, we were trying to figure out state by state, does it really make a difference? But I think a large thing gets noticed. And we started doing Asar in 2005. By 2008, we began to get visitors. And our first set of visitors were exactly across the water, so they came from East Africa. So Kenya, Uganda, and Tanzania. And when they came, we showed them what we did. We told them about the mistakes that we had made. And we said, you should take whatever out of this. I mean, does this make sense to you? And if it does, then take what you want.
The idea of contextualizing.
So the idea is that if something, it's like you go to your friend's house, you have a nice dish, and then if you like it, you ask for the recipe. But when you bring it home, you often add your own bits and pieces, and then it becomes your dish. And I think the East Africans did exactly that. Not only that, we told them that we call this thing Asar, because a thing has to have a name. You know, if it's your child, there's no child in the world who doesn't have a name. If it's yours, it has a name. But your own child has to have the name that you give it. Absolutely. And so we call it Asar, which means impact. Pakistan started doing it, and we have very common languages, so they call it Asar. There's a small initiative that started in Nepal, and they call it Asar, not because we are the same brand, but because it makes sense to call it that. The East Africans, Kenya, Uganda, and Tanzania call it Uwezo, and I think Uwezo in Kiswahili means capability. So in Senegal, they call it something else. And basically what happened was people came, they saw, they took what made sense to them. And really, the interesting thing is that there's a lot of commonality which people voluntarily took. So it was not, that somebody imposed a set of indicators on you. You came together and, you did what you want. So for us, it was a big learning experience that, why can't people do things with people? And then they, in their own way, I'm sure, are influencing, their governments. More recently, the solution, so that was the understanding of the problem. The solution, teaching at the right level, is also now being tried in several countries in Africa. Zambia, Cote d'Ivoire, some beginnings in partnership with JICA in Madagascar and in Niger, and then some very promising pilots in Nigeria. And we hope, and in Ghana, Tikai is a version of teaching at the right level in Ghana. And again, I think there is the idea is that there have to be some leaders of practice who then try it out in their own context, and once they feel, Botswana has had some very good results as well, then they will take it forward,
Right.
and they will do it as long as it makes sense in their own context. And perhaps now we will learn from the experiments that are happening there. So the Indian Ocean gets in the way, but perhaps.
That's excellent and good to know that we're looking at this across the globe, essentially. I'm no education specialist, but I do want to sound a little bit smart. So I did some research, and then I heard about there's something called EGMA,
Yes.
TIMSS. So there are these global assessments for literacy and numeracy. And I'm very curious. I mean, I work with the World Bank, so we need to make sure things can apply in more than one setting, as you said anecdotally, but is there any measure? So can you tell us where ASER sits in these discussions?
So I think there are several important differences. EGRA and ASER have the same key dimension, is that it's an oral one-on-one assessment. Now, how can you give a pen and paper assessment to kids like these? If you can't read, you can't really do a pen and paper test. And therefore, I think that a lot of our international tests were actually meant for different conditions, where kids by 3rd or 4th or 5th grade were able to, most kids could, read what was given to them and they could answer. So I think EGRA and ASER are, and they've more or less, been generated at the same time, look at kids and measure reading. If reading is such a fundamental capability, then we really need to look at that. And we also know that children get left behind quite early. So even TIMSS and PEARLS, I think, is 4th grade or 5th grade. There's nothing as low as that. So in that sense, they're common. But EGRA is a lot more complicated. I mean, it's a lot longer. It's usually done in school. And I think it serves a certain purpose. But if you want to do large scale, and one of the things that we feel quite strongly in India is that the reason we have 95, 96% enrollment in school is because everybody understood schooling. You understood what it means to go to school. You get up in the morning, you tie your hair, hopefully brush your teeth, go to a building. And this was not just an explanation, a vision that a government had. I think parents could understand what that is. The community could understand what it is. With learning, I think that's the challenge that we have, that everybody must feel like they can participate in it and that they can begin to solve some of the problems. Because if that happens, I think that's the only way to have universal learning. And therefore, to us, it's important that the methods and the mechanisms you use are simple and easily understandable by everyone. Some of the other international assessments need much more analysis and maybe technical expertise. I'm not saying that I think the simpler things look in front, the
more complex.
Complex, or not complex, but they have to be rigorous at the back. But the use has to be easy and the understanding has to be easy if you want everyone to participate and develop.
Excellent. So as we stay at the village level, I remember you talked about this headman, right? And reaching the most vulnerable. But we do know that even at the village level, there's issues of gender, women and women, what women can do, what men do differently. I'm curious to know if you faced any challenges that you can share with us in doing the work you're doing, but even more on a personal level as a woman leading the effort.
I would say that in primary education, I think that we see less. We see some gender differences in India for sure. You see that if you have private schools, more boys tend to go to private schools, and if you see the government schools, more girls are there. But I think that like universal primary school enrollment, I think everybody would like to see at least that much happen.
Right.
And therefore, I think that when you are able to do, like our Pradhan, like our village headman, you would like to see that every kid who is there has at least this much. Maybe the divergence will happen when they're a little bit older, when you have to make some harder choices, schools are further away, maybe science you can only do in certain places. But at least at the primary level and for such foundational skills, I think the time has come when people feel that this must be available to all. And you can't really build either for growth or for equity. If you don't have this, you're not going to go forward. I fought with the Pradhanji, so you can still do that. I have, maybe as I'm getting older, I pay more attention to the older women in the village. When I was younger, I was like, oh, no, she's like a granny. Now that I'm a granny, I feel, oh, grannies are really important. But I remember once we were, I was doing something like this, and this woman called me and she said, "What are you doing?" And she was an old lady, clearly illiterate. And I said, in a slightly patronizing way, I said, "Oh, I'm doing a survey." In fact, I said, "I'm doing a survey." And she started laughing. And she said, I still remember kind of a toothless laugh. And she said, "That's not what you're doing. You don't even know what you're doing." And that stopped me because, as I told you, I do have an ego. And, I like to think that I know what I'm doing. And so I stopped and I said, "Why? What do you think I'm doing?" And she said, "Actually, what you're doing is not a survey. Because a survey is when you people who don't know anything come from the cities to the village and we have to tell you." Okay. I mean, it's such a great definition of a survey.
Wow.
But this is something that we don't know and you don't know, and we do it together because asking a child to read is actually making it visible, and it's like something new that is happening for all of us. So this is not a survey, this is something else.
Right.
We haven't been able to give a name to that something else, but remember, always talk to the old ladies.
Absolutely, without a doubt.
Am I allowed to ask you a question?
Just before then, I thought I
Okay.
was in charge here.
See, the young ladies are very...
With all due respect, as we say in Ghana. So, we've talked about education a lot. Human development is education, as you heard this morning from our vice president. Education, health, social protection, gender, it goes across, productive inclusion and such. So, I want to know truthfully, is there anything applicable here beyond looking at the literacy and numeracy for my colleagues here who are not education specialists? Or should we just let things be?
I mean, it's a hard question for me to answer because I don't know other fields, even to the extent that I know education. But somewhere along the journey of USSR, UNDP in India actually, and the Planning Commission, it's now called something else, but basically the planning body, they approached us and said, "Why can't this simple measurement to get understanding for action be done in other sectors?" And we said, we are happy to try it out because there's nothing particular about that we are doing it in this way, but we would need help from other people. So we've done a couple of times, not huge and national, but 10, 15, 20 districts, of trying to create what this old lady said. I mean, basically what she was saying is, how do you do some activity that actually uncovers the issue in front of your eyes, right? And we've done it in kind of livelihoods, water and sanitation. I don't call it nutrition, I would call it food and feeding so we did a couple of things. We had a pictorial survey so that, again, it's not this, I don't know, so I ask you and you know and you tell me and I write it down or whatever. I mean, to break away from that, a pictorial one can be maybe a little bit more participative. But we've seen actually quite similar energies around things like, water testing. When the color of the water changes, everybody rushes. Like with the reading, they bring their kids and they say, "Find out what my son can do." People will bring their water and say, "Why is it turning black?" Or the salt, when you check for iodine in the salt, I mean, that's also it's like a mini science experiment right there. So my view is that we have to think creatively about activities which can focus on some core indicator that can then both generate the conversation, provide thought for what could be the solution, and also this process also you identify people who are really interested in doing something about it. So I think it's a great platform, but you have to be creative, and I think the challenge is to be simple. So I can't speak for what can be done in other sectors, but I think it would be interesting to try out different things. So can I ask my question now?
If you insist, ma'am.
So my question to Christabel is, I know you work in social protection.
I do.
And I know that you've had, in the past you've worked maybe in some other sectors. So if I had to ask you, what is your tiger, what would you
Oh,
say?
my. But that's, no. The analytical brain says like 20,000 things right now. I can't think of, hold on. Give me a second. Thank you. Okay, So I'm not going to talk about what I do as in social protection and jobs, but because this cuts across a lot. One of my biggest issues lately, actually, is trying to figure out how to get more women in governance and politics. Mm-hmm. But could that be my tiger?
I think there's no right or wrong answer.
Okay.
I think you have to go find your Pradhanji, see if he's convinced, and what the old lady says,
right.
And then you'll know if you have your tiger.
Huh. Can I get a round of applause? I had a tiger, right? So because I was truly in charge, I'm going to turn it to you guys. We're all going to write what our tiger is. So take a minute, just 1 minute, in the spirit of participation and some of the things we learned this morning, and think for a quick second. Do we close our eyes, maybe, in the meditation realm? Let's think for a quick second in all the amazing work that we do across the world. What is your tiger? And it doesn't have to be your work. It could be your passion. So we'll just be quiet for 1 minute and think through this. I may ask somebody to tell me to.
I can hear 1,000 brains thinking.
I know. Some are writing, some are sleeping. Great, thank you so much for participating. I'm not going to ask you to tell us what your tiger is, just think about it yourself. But thank you so much, Rukmini, for such an amazing topic, bringing it down to earth for us to understand, and for the movement you're creating. I really think this is exciting stuff. Can we give her a round of applause? Thank you.